Good morning. This is Ron. Welcome to Story Time. And this is good morning. It is Thursday, April the 13th, 2017, and I am recording this live. I'm recording this on location in Pasadena, California. So we're at the 48 Laws of Powers, the book we're reading by Robert Greene and Joost Elfers. And we're at law number 3, which is called Conceal Your Intentions. Now, this chapter has 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. So today I'm going to be reading part 1. Judgment. Keep people off balance and in the dark by never revealing the purpose behind your actions. If they have no clue or what you're up to, they cannot prepare a defense. Guide them far enough down the wrong path, envelop them in enough smoke, and by the time they realize your intentions, it will be too late. Part 1. Use decoyed objects of desire and red herrings to throw people off the scent. If at any point in the deception you practice people have the slightest suspicion as to your intentions, all is lost. Do not give them the chance to sense what you are up to. Throw them off the scent by dragging red herrings across the path. Use false sincerity, send ambiguous signals, set up misleading objects of desire. Unable to distinguish the genuine from the false, they cannot pick up your real goal. Transgression of the law. Over several weeks, Ninon de Lenclos, the most infamous courtesan of the 17th century France, listened patiently as the Marquis explained his struggles in pursuing a beautiful but difficult young countess. Ninon was 62 at the time and more than experienced in matters of love. The Marquis was a lad of 22, handsome, dashing, but hopelessly inexperienced in romance. At first, Ninon was amused to hear the Marquis talk about his mistakes, but finally, she had had enough. Unable to bear ineptitude in any realm, least of all in seducing a woman, she decided to take the young man under her wing. First, he had to understand that this was war, that the beautiful countess was a citadel to which he had to lay siege as carefully as any general. Every step had to be planned and executed with the utmost attention to detail and nuance. Instructing the Marquis to start over, Ninon told him to approach the countess with a bit of a distance, an air of nonchalance. The next time the two were alone together, she said, he would confide in the countess as would a friend, but not a potential lover. This was to throw her off the scent. The countess was no longer to take his interest in her for granted. Perhaps he was only interested in friendship. Ninon planned ahead. Once the countess was confused, it would be time to make her jealous. At the next encounter, at a major fete in Paris, the Marquis would show up with a beautiful young woman at his side. This beautiful young woman had equally beautiful friends, so that wherever the countess would now see the Marquis, he would be surrounded by the most stunning young women in Paris. Not only would the countess be seething with jealousy, she would come to see the Marquis as someone who was desired by others. It was hard for Ninon to make the Marquis understand, but she patiently explained that a woman who is interested in a man wants to see that other women are interested in him too. Not only does that give him instant value, it makes it all the more satisfying to snatch him from their clutches. Once the countess was jealous but intrigued, it would be time to beguile her. On Ninon's instructions, the Marquis would fail to show up at affairs where the countess expected to see him. Then, suddenly, he would appear at salons he had never frequented before, but that the countess attended on a regular basis. She would be unable to predict his moves. All of this would push her into a state of emotional confusion that is a prerequisite for successful seduction. These moves were executed and took several weeks. Ninan monitored the Marquis's progress. Through her network of spies, she heard how the Countess would laugh a little harder at his witticisms, listen more closely to his stories. She heard that the Countess was suddenly asking questions about him. Her friends told her that at social affairs, the Countess would often look up at the Marquis, following his steps. Ninan felt certain that the young woman was falling under his spell. It was a matter of weeks now, maybe a month or two, but if all went smoothly, the citadel would fall. A few days later, the Marquis was at the Countess's home. They were alone. Suddenly, he was a different man. This time, acting on his own impulse, rather than following Ninan's instructions, he took the courtesan's hands and told her he was in love with her. The young woman seemed confused, a reaction he did not expect. She became polite, then excused herself. For the rest of the evening, she avoided his eyes, was not there to say goodnight to him. The next few times he visited, he was told she was not at home. When she finally admitted him again, the two felt awkward and uncomfortable with each other. The spell was broken. Interpretation. Ninan de L'Enclos knew everything about the art of love. The greatest writers, thinkers, and politicians of the time had been her lovers. Men like La Rochefeld, Molière, Richelieu. Seduction was a game to her, and she practiced it with skill. As she got older and her reputation grew, the most important families in France would send their sons to her to be instructed in the matters of love. Ninan knew that men and women were very different, but when it comes to seduction, they were the same. Deep down inside, they often sense when they're being seduced, but they give in because they enjoy the feeling of being led along. It is a pleasure to let go and to allow the other person to detour you into a strange country. Everything in seduction, however, depends on suggestion. You cannot announce your intention or reveal them directly in words. Instead, you must throw your targets off the scent. To surrender to your guidance, they must be appropriately confused. You have to scramble your signals, appear interested in another man or woman, the decoy, then hint at being interested in the target, then feign indifference, on and on. Such patterns not only confuse, they excite. Imagine the story from the Countess's perspective. After a few of the Marquis's moves, she sensed the Marquis was playing some sort of game, but the game delighted her. She did not know where he was leading her, but so much the better. His moves intrigued her, each of them keeping her waiting for the next one. She even enjoyed her jealousy and confusion, for sometimes any emotion is better than the boredom of security. Perhaps the Marquis had ulterior motives, most men do, but she was willing to wait and see. And probably if she had been made to wait long enough, what he was up to would not have mattered. The moment the Marquis uttered that fatal word, love, however, all was changed. This was no longer a game with moves, it was an artless show of passion. His intention was revealed. He was seducing her. This put everything he had done in a new light. All that before had been charming now seemed ugly and conniving. The Countess felt embarrassed and used. A door closed that would never open again. And according to Balthazar Gracian, do not be held a cheat. Even though it is impossible to live today without being one, let your greatest cunning lie in covering up what looks like cunning. Observance of the law. In 1850, the young Otto von Bismarck, then a 35-year-old deputy in the Prussian parliament, was at a turning point in his career. The issues of the day were the unification of the many states, including Prussia, into which Germany was then divided, and a war against Austria, the powerful neighbor to the south that hoped to keep the Germans weak and at odds, even threatening to intervene if they tried to unite. Prince William, next in line to be Prussia's king, was in favor of going to war, and the Parliament rallied to the cause, prepared to back any mobilization of troops. The only ones to oppose war were the present king, Frederick William IV, and his ministers who preferred to appease the powerful Austrians. Throughout his career, Bismarck had been a loyal, even passionate supporter of Prussian might and power. He dreamed of German unification, of going to war against Austria and humiliating the country that for so long had kept Germany divided. A former soldier, he saw warfare as glorious business. This, after all, was the man who years later would say, the great questions of the time will be decided not by speeches and resolutions, but by iron and blood. Passionate patriot and lover of military glory, Bismarck nevertheless gave a speech in Parliament at the height of the war fever that astonished all who heard it. "Woe unto the statesman," he said, "who makes war without a reason that will still be valid when the war is over. After the war, you will all look differently at these questions. Will you then have the courage to turn to the peasant contemplating the ashes of his farm, to the man who has been crippled, to the father who has lost his children?" Not only did Bismarck go on to talk of the madness of this war, but, strangest of all, he praised Austria and defended her actions. This went against everything he had stood for. The consequences were immediate. Bismarck was against the war. What could this possibly mean? Other deputies were confused, and several of them changed their votes. Eventually, the king and his ministers won out, and war was averted. A few weeks after Bismarck's infamous speech, the king, grateful that he had spoken for peace, made him a cabinet minister. A few years later, he became the Prussian premier. In this role, he eventually led his country and a peace-loving king into a war against Austria, crushing the former empire and establishing a mighty German state with Prussia at its head. Interpretation. At the time of his speech in 1850, Bismarck made several calculations. First, he sensed that the Prussian military, which had not kept pace with other European armies, was unready for war. That Austria, in fact, might very well win, a disastrous result for the future. Second, if the war were lost, and Bismarck had supported it, his career would be gravely jeopardized. The king and his conservative ministers wanted peace. Bismarck wanted power. The answer was to throw people off the scent by supporting a cause he detested, saying things he would laugh at if said by another. A whole country was fooled. It was because of Bismarck's speech that the king made him a minister, a position from which he quickly rose to be prime minister, attaining the power to strengthen the Prussian military and accomplish what he had wanted all along, the humiliation of Austria and the unification of Germany under Prussia's leadership. Bismarck was certainly one of the cleverest statesmen who ever lived, a master of strategy and deception. No one suspected what he was up to in this case. Had he announced his real intentions, arguing that it was better to wait now and fight later, he would not have won the argument, since most Prussians wanted war at that moment and mistakenly believed that their army was superior to the Austrians. Had he played up to the king, asking to be made minister in exchange for supporting peace, he would not have succeeded either. The king would have distrusted his ambition and doubted his sincerity. By being completely insincere and sending misleading signals, however, he deceived everyone, concealed his purpose, and attained everything he wanted. Such is the power of hiding your intentions. Keys to power. Most people are open books. They say what they feel, blurt out their opinions at every opportunity, and constantly reveal their plans and intentions. They do this for several reasons. First, it is easy and natural to always want to talk about one's feelings and plans for the future. It takes effort to control your tongue and monitor what you reveal. Second, many believe that by being honest and open, they are winning people's hearts and showing their good nature. They are greatly deluded. Honesty is actually a blunt instrument which bloodies more than it cuts. Your honesty is likely to offend people. It is much more prudent to tailor your words, telling people what they want to hear, rather than the coarse and ugly truth of what you feel or think. More important, by being unabashedly open, you make yourself so predictable and familiar that it is almost impossible to respect or fear you. And power will not accrue to a person who cannot inspire such emotions. If you yearn for power, quickly lay honesty aside and train yourself in the art of concealing your intentions. Master the art, and you will always have the upper hand. Basic to an ability to conceal one's intentions is a simple truth about human nature. Our first instinct is to always trust appearances. We cannot go around doubting the reality of what we see and hear, constantly imagining that appearances concealed something else would exhaust and terrify us. This fact makes it relatively easy to conceal one's intentions. Simply dangle an object you seem to desire, a goal you seem to aim for, in front of people's eyes, and they will take the appearance for reality. Once their eyes focus on the decoy, they will fail to notice what you are really up to. In seduction, set up conflicting signals, such as desire and indifference, and you not only throw them off the scent, you inflame their desire to possess you. A tactic that is often effective in setting up a red herring is to appear to support an idea or cause that is actually contrary to your own sentiments. Bismarck used this to great effect in his speech in 1850. Most people believe you have experienced a change of heart, since it is so unusual to play so lightly with something as emotional as one's opinions and values. The same applies for any decoyed object of desire. Seem to want something in which you are actually not at all interested, and your enemies will be thrown off the scent, making all kinds of errors in their calculations. During the War of the Spanish Succession in 1711, the Duke of Marlborough, head of the English army, wanted to destroy a key French fort because it protected a vital thoroughfare into France. Yet he knew that if he destroyed it, the French would realize what he wanted, to advance down the road. Instead, then, he merely captured the fort and garrisoned it with some of his own troops, making it appear as if he wanted it for some purpose of his own. The French attacked the fort, and the Duke let them recapture it. Once they had it back, though, they destroyed it, figuring that the Duke had wanted it for some important reason. Now that the fort was gone, the road was unprotected, and Marlborough could easily march into France. Use this tactic in the following manner. Hide your intentions not by closing up, with the risk of appearing secretive and making people suspicious, but by talking endlessly about your desires and goals, just not your real one. Then you will then kill 3 birds with 1 stone. You appear friendly, open and trusting, you conceal your intentions, and you send your rivals on a time-consuming wild goose chase. Another powerful tool in throwing people off the scent is false sincerity. People easily mistake sincerity for honesty. Remember, their first instinct is to trust appearances, and since they value honesty and want to believe in the honesty of those around them, they will rarely doubt you or see through your act. Seeming to believe what you say gives your words great weight. This is how Iago deceived and destroyed Othello. Given the depth of his emotions, the apparent sincerity of his concerns about Desdemona's supposed infidelity, how could Othello distrust him? This is also how the great con artist Yellow Kid Wheel pulled the wool over suckers' eyes. Seeming to believe so deeply in the decoyed object he was dangling before them, a phony stock, a touted racehorse, he made its reality hard to doubt. It is important, of course, not to go too far in this area. Sincerity is a tricky tool. Appear overpassionate and you raise suspicions. Be measured and believable, or your ruse will seem the put on that it is. To make your false sincerity an effective weapon in concealing your intentions, espouse a belief in honesty and forthrightness as important social values. Do this as publicly as possible. Emphasize your position on this subject by occasionally divulging some heartfelt thought, not only one that is actually meaningless or irrelevant, of course, though only one that is actually meaningless or irrelevant, of course. Napoleon's minister Talleyrand was a master at taking people into his confidence by revealing some apparent secret. This feigned confidence, a decoy, would then elicit a real confidence on the other person's part. Remember, the best deceivers do everything they can to cloak their roguish qualities. They cultivate an air of honesty in one area to disguise their dishonesty in others. Honesty is merely another decoy in their arsenal of weapons. And that's the end of part 1 for chapter 3. And what I want to mention is that in this whole book, I think it was put out some years ago, but is put out in a time in our culture in which there seems to be high value placed on power and the idea that might makes right and that the ends justify the means. And that you go through all of these machinations that are described in this book, and what you really end up with is a sense of being lost, a loss of value to life. You're going to be asking yourself every day when you get up, is it worth it? You're going to be asking yourself, what's the meaning of life? Why do I bother? Because you're treating life as a chess game. And Ayn Rand had it right when she said that chess is a whole lot of mental effort for absolutely nothing. Anyways, next Tuesday will be part 2 called Use Smokescreens to Disguise Your Actions. And thank you for joining me, and have a great weekend.